All right, here we go, y'all. Here we go. Another episode of Diverse Talking Heads podcast. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs. And man, do we have a great show for you tonight. Tonight is a great show because we don't have a topic per se. We're not talking about saving the world or turning things inside out. We're not going to blow anything up tonight. We're going to talk about this podcast and how this experience has been for the group of panelists who has contributed so wholeheartedly to this podcast for the last two seasons. So let me introduce them. I'm starting from the top of what I see here. We have panelist Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Hello. Thank you, Calvin.
Thank you, Mark. And we have panelist Amy. Amy, welcome back to the
Hi,
show.
thank you.
All right. And we have our Cal Ripken of the group podcast. We have Charles. Charlie.
Alvin, thanks for having me.
All right, all right. And next I see Karen. Hey, Karen, welcome. I think Karen's having a little issue there, but we will get back to her. I see Dan. Hey,
I'm here. Hi, everybody. I was like, Zoom
hey,
better not freeze up now.
hey, Karen. And we have Dan. Dan back with us. Hey, Dan.
Hey, oh, good to be with y'all today.
Hey.
Now, sometimes during the season, we have a few guests panelists pop in, and one of them happens to be known by just her first name, like any respectable diva would be. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the warm welcome as well.
All right. Well, let's get right to it. On the previous podcast episode, I gave some thoughts from my point of view why I wanted to start Diverse Talking Heads and what it's all about. But you guys, you panelists, are the ones that really um, drive home the podcast with your commentary, your answers, the thoughtful insights. So I wanted to ask you. Let's start with Amy. Amy, how has this podcast uh, impacted your life? Has it changed in any way since you've been a part of this?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for the question. I love the opportunity to talk about some important topics that are really close to my heart, such as things like foster care or mental health. I love having that opportunity because it's sometimes difficult to work the heavy topics into daily conversation. So it's nice to be able to just speak on what I feel are very important things. And I would say that by the other topics that folks have brought forth, you, Calvin, everyone else that's participated, whether they've only been here a couple episodes or for several, it's pushed me out of my comfort zone on other topics where I might have felt like I don't really want to have an opinion on that, or I don't really need to think about that. I do need to think about it. I live here and it's a topic that affects people, so I should inform myself on it. So it has really been educational and challenging at times, but in the best way. So it's been a huge positive in my life, and I'm so grateful.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And yes, it has been challenging even for me as the host because there's a lot of research that I do to prepare for each and every show. I can't moderate this group without knowing a bit about the topic. I would say a bit more about the topics than you guys might. But part of being the moderator is also following the discussion. Sometimes we go down a rabbit hole and I have to decide, do I want to jump in down there behind you, or do I want to pull you back out and get back on track? And that is an acquired talent. So talking about getting ready to do the show and research, um, Karen, is there anything that you do particularly to get ready for the show?
No more than anyone else. I mean, what my issue has been is getting current information about things that are currently being spoken about. You know, when you go in and you're looking for definitions of terms, acronyms, words, and stuff, in order to participate in the conversation intelligently, you're like, what? No. And to see an article about something that you want to discuss today, and the most current article is 2012, 2016, I discovered that if you check the encyclopedias, you'll get more current information, more
Wow.
current information. And I was surprised. I was surprised because when we did the thing about mental health, so much of the data was old, and you would think that you would be more current on that particular piece because we have so many people with mental issues. But I truly enjoy our conversations. I've learned how to think better and differently, with positive results. And I like the fact that we are all able to speak to each other without disagreeing. And that's important.
Okay. Well, thank you, Karen. And for our listeners, when I put this podcast together, the one thing that I had in mind was that, Karen mentioned people agreeing. In my point of view, people do not have to agree, you know, but the main thing is that we all have to be courteous to each other. We have to listen. We have to try to learn, understand why. And you guys are at all times able to ask questions. If you hear something that you don't understand and need clarity on it, I would do that. I would do that. I would expect you to do the same thing. And I think Amy mentioned being uncomfortable. That is where we say growth comes from. Growth comes from that uncomfortable place. When you're willing to do something you may not usually do, or talk about something that you usually may not talk about, or give your point of view, that's where you find growth. So, Mark, you've been with us for a season and a half, just about. Uh, how has this experience worked for you?
It's been a learning experience for me also. I really, Charlie and I went to the same same college, same university, but we went there at different times. So we really didn't know each other other than we were Facebook friends. And he sort of threw the invitation out to me about being part of this. And I was like, hey, I kind of was at a place where I was like deciding to say yes to lots of things like that and just learn about it and find out more, because I'm really curious about podcasts, and I've done a lot of individual one-off podcast stuff, but been a guest on a lot of podcasts, but never been a part of a panel that had to prepare on a bi-monthly basis. So that I've learned a lot, and it's been real interesting getting to know all of you and all of your different points of view and perspectives. And I've learned a lot from every one of you individually, with the things you've had to say on the podcast, and then just in the way that you've treated each other and me as a guest, to get involved in this. So thank you to all of you for your kindness and thoughtfulness, and I've also pretty much agreed with mostly everything anybody said in our panel. I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
That fact that we all have different perspectives and we all have different ways of doing things, but we all have I feel like we have a similar sense of justice, and I really appreciate and respect that. from all of you.
I love that phrase you use, a similar sense of justice. I've been thinking about the last two seasons, and I would agree with that as well. You know, as kids, we're taught right from wrong, what's right, what's considered wrong. And I think that as a group, we all have the same sense of justice. I would agree with you. You know, we all agree, at least in theory, what's right and what's wrong. So, yes, thank you for that, Mark. And I'm going to ask Ansonia, who is a podcaster, host of her own podcast. It happens to be the number two podcast for gospel music in the country. Ansonia,
Wow. Thank you for that.
yeah, that's a shameless plug just for you. Shameless plug. But when moderating a group podcast, and I know you've done this several times, you have interviews on each of your shows. What are some things that you incorporate to keep the conversation moving?
One of the things is that I do ask any of my guests, thank you for asking that question. I do ask my guests to send me a bio because several of them I don't know any background about them. And I use that as a starting point because before each podcast, I do an introduction of my guests based off of the bio that they did. And then they may ask questions. Some things I will purposely leave out of the introduction so that we can elaborate. And while we're talking and having a discussion, I take notes so that they may say something that I want to come back to. And I'll say, hey, you said that you learned how to play in Italy. Tell me about that. Talk to me about your process, what that went through to engage them in conversation. And prior to actually even starting, is we know that on radio and everywhere, you don't want dead air. And I do try to encourage my guests, stretch out your story. It's us talking, just like we're sitting in the living room and we're having a conversation, or I called you on the phone and we're just talking and having a conversation. And that is how I try to continue the conversation going. And sometimes I get a little long-winded and have to cut my own self out of the out of the podcast. However, it is I'd like to make people feel comfortable, and that way they share more rather than attacking. I've never been one to want to attack people. I want to bring out the positive information.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Ansonia. And this next panelist is a guy that I've known because we're both Toastmasters and we worked together on several projects way back in the day now. And I had a respect for him for saying what's on his mind in no uncertain terms. And I asked him to be a part of the podcast. So, Dan, let me ask you what this experience has meant or brought to you.
Well, I have to say I've quite enjoyed it over the last couple seasons. One of the things that really strikes me is we can agree to disagree, and there's respect there. I think in our present political discourse, we've lost the art of agreeing to disagree. You know, there are many times when we do agree, but there are times when I know I've done it. I said, you know, a person on the panel said something, I go, I disagree, and this is why. But we do it in a respectful manner. And sometimes we're able to even hash it out, and we end up finding out that we're like 80% the same, and it's really the margins that are getting people upset. And that happens a lot of in our political world because we've hit some pretty tough topics. So what I find is I miss those days. I grew up with that kind of political discourse, the agree to disagree, people on either side of the aisle who would have a drink together after work. Um, They would treat each other more like human beings. Nowadays, it's not only do I disagree with you, but you're evil simply because you don't say the same thing I do. And the respect that I've seen here is just wonderful in that respect. We have that space to agree and to disagree in a respectful manner, and hopefully we're modeling that for some other people. You know, our views are very diverse. It is a diverse group of people, just like the title of your podcast says. Um, one of the challenges that I enjoy is there's certain topics that I'm well versed in, but there's other ones that I don't know very well. So what that forces me to do is do my research before the podcast and really delve into it. And then I get a chance to actually expand my learning, also learning from the other panelists. So that kind of arrangement has been really fascinating for me. It's been a growth piece for me. And I really love having the opportunity to give my opinions, but also to do the art of active listening and listen to what the other panelists have to say. And that is unique. You know, like Ansonia said, there are a lot of antagonistic ones out there, and we don't do that. We may attack a topic very aggressively, but never people. And
Yeah.
that to me is unique, and I think it models a better way of going forward for other people.
Thank you, Dan. I totally agree with you. There's a lot of podcasts out there. I've heard many of them where it's a argument during the session. There's a fight during the session. You know, people are upset with each other. They don't listen to each other. And we both know that the best way to communicate is to listen. You have to be a good listener to be a good communicator. Go hand in hand. And that's one of the things I like about this podcast as well. But we have one panelist here who's been on every group episode. He's been on every episode except the last one, which I did by myself. We call him the Iron Man, the Cal Ripken of Diverse Talking Heads. I'm talking about you, Charlie. Yeah, you've been on every episode, even the ones with
Well, we did that one with the ladies, so remember, so I wasn't on that one.
You was on. You was there.
I was there that day. I was listening to it. Yeah, I was on. Yeah. I was in the studio. Yes.
You just didn't have your wig on.
Right.
None of that.
You cut me off.
Yeah. But you were there. So Charlie, I just want to ask you. You and I go back quite a ways as well, and you're also someone that I respect for your opinion and your willingness to give your opinion. That's why I asked you to be a part of. How has this podcast impacted you? Anything particular that stands out in your mind?
When you approached me about this, and we've known each other over 20 years since we did the play together, and the first two things I thought of, I said, one, I like this. This is a really cool idea, and I like doing cool stuff, And of course, because you're on podcast dummy, as I say, you get to, it's kind of the acting genes pop up on that, obviously, as well. But I also thought, and one criteria I use to get involved in certain activities nowadays is it gives me an opportunity to become a better person. I can learn from all of you here and our various guest panelists that have been on, and from yourself, of course, Calvin, and I've learned a lot of things on that, I'm also an Uber driver, and I've learned a lot of things from people on there. I could have probably a diverse Uber talking heads there if I could have recorded or whatever. But I like to think that's made me open to different things. I tried to avoid stereotypes. I remember when you did the first show, which you call something else, but I call it the pilot. And you sent the picture over, and Dan and Karen were also on the show. I will be honest with you. I looked at it. Oh God, I'm the old white guy in this show. Oh my God, they're going to affect the stuff out of me. And I said, boy, am I going to prove them wrong. So, because I don't follow those norms very much. So, so there was maybe a little competitive spirit on there as well. I've learned a lot. I've had to research subjects I didn't know, sometimes naively. We did a show on when you sent the thing over and said, "Oh, we're doing a show on DEI." I honestly didn't know what the heck DEI was. And I thought for a minute, is it REI? You know, that's we have one of those in my community. There's a camping store, you know, and why are we doing a show on camping? I mean, no sense. Then I thought, well, why don't you look it up, silly boy? And my mind started acting normally. And then I realized what it was. And then, as I mentioned before the show, I had a conversation with somebody about it yesterday. And I believe it's an important topic, but for some reason I did not know about it, to be honest with you, at the time.
Okay.
So I learned a lot on this. Learning with some of you who I did not know beforehand. Amy and Mark I did know beforehand, and suggested they be on the show. And they've both been valuable contributors, as has the rest of you. And you know, I really enjoy doing this and being a part of it. I've done a couple of shows where I had nothing planned, and I came on and I went, "Oh, I actually said something somewhat intelligent. How did I do that?" Because I didn't even look up the subject, or I thought I knew enough about it, or whatever. At least it sounded intelligent. So you didn't say it wasn't intelligent, so I guess it was okay. So, but it's a learning process. You know, as we grow older, I want to learn. I still want to learn. There are things to learn. There are people here to learn from and understand their point of view. And the thing I've learned ultimately is every one of us is trying to do the best we can with what we have.
All right. Now, I'm the type of guy, I would never say to you or anybody else, that was stupid, that was dumb. I would rather phrase it in a way
Well,
to
yeah,
say,
but this is a
to
different.
say, Charlie, could you explain that a little bit more? What you just said, you know,
You
that's
probably did.
and Sonia, I see your hand raised.
What I like about your show and everyone on your show is that you're bringing out the art of communication in the sense of, as Dan brought up about people agreeing to disagree. A lot of people are missing that now. They jump from 0 to 1,000 without thinking about it. And that's why we have so much violence that's going on now, because people don't know how to talk. If I disagree with something you said, here's what I can do is agree to disagree and walk away. But we have so many people out here now that they're quick to jump and either attack someone or fight someone. And we know this in the Chicago area, quick to pull out a gun and shoot at somebody. You know, we need to get back. And I think your show, with all of your guests, is showing people that you can communicate. And okay, I don't agree with the color shirt you have on today. That's fine. That's just my opinion. And I'll move on. But we need to learn how to do that. And I think your show, this podcast, and your guests are really showing the audience that there's another way to communicate. And it's not always yelling and screaming. It's not always calling people out of their name. It's not always trying to degrade someone, but it is respecting that person in their space and respecting yourself. And then you can walk away like that. So that's what I like about the podcast and all of your co-hosts, your guests.
Right, thank you. When getting ready for this show, my preparation is to come up with a list of 10 questions. I never have more than 10 questions, but I have never gotten to ask all 10 questions because your commentary, your answers are so intriguing that it leads to other questions. So my list in front of me, if I get to 6, I'm good. I'm good. Six questions in like 35 minutes. I'm good. I'm satisfied with that because we've answered a lot more than what I had on the paper. So I'm going to ask you next, what has been your favorite episode? We've done a lot. We talked about federal police reform and mental health, and salary transparency and DEI, of course, and Asian hate and anti-Semitism. What has been your favorite topic, your favorite episode? And I guess we'll start with Mark on this.
I'm not sure if it's one you mentioned, but we did a show about teachers and
Yes.
challenges that teachers are facing in our current political climate. And I think since we've done that show, they've turned the heat up even greater on this whole topic on a statewide level, legislatively, all across the country. And then school boards now are doing ridiculous things in certain places. Like one parent can complain about a book and then it gets banned for the whole entire school or library or school district. And some really important works of literature are being banned right now. That's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I really liked that show that we did because we approached that topic from a lot of different points of view. I think we even had a teacher with us on the panel for that discussion. And then all of us brought, like Amy had brought in experiences that you had with the school board, I think that you were working with, right? At the time. And all of us had a lot to say about that. So I loved that. I loved working on that show. One of the shows that was hardest, I felt like, was the show that we did on ageism. I felt like that was a difficult topic, like almost that we don't even have the right language sometimes to even talk about ageism and talking about people's age. And it's like we don't really, I felt like I was walking on landmines a couple of times in that topic where I was trying not to offend other people, but I think I might have been, and just unknowingly. That was sort of a hard one, I felt like. But
Okay.
I've learned a lot from every single time from everything that we've talked about. I've learned a lot.
Okay. And Dan, is there a favorite episode that you've enjoyed or one you didn't like as much?
So Mark had mentioned it. My favorite was probably ageism, because ageism is the one ism that we all have to run into eventually, and because it's kind of ignored, we're still okay to do old people jokes. We're still the discrimination at that level is just off the charts. What I like about it is it reflects, by discussing ageism, it ties into other isms. It ties into racism. It ties into anti-Semitism. It ties into the DEI discussion. They're all sort of there because what we're looking at is a form of hate, a form of bigotry that brands a group because of a particular aspect of them. And we all get older. And ageism also can be the other end. It can be doing it to young people too, not just older. So it covers the entire spectrum. So for me, it was quite poignant because the things that came up in that discussion are things that we hit on and these other kind of similar topics that we came across as a group. And it kind of, for me, in a way, it almost tied them all together. Because if you experience racism, you still experience ageism. If you experience anti-Semitism, you still experience ageism. If you could just go down the list. Asian hate, you can still get ageism. So everybody so it's kind of this thread that goes through that teaches us how we really have to counter all these kind of hates.
Yeah.
Against the LGBTQ community, all those things, they all are a similar kind of mindset that allows people to justify these prejudices. And for me, that's why it was so powerful.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
And
Yes.
in the LGBTQIA community, once you're over 30, you're too old. It's a joke there, but it's weird how different communities deal with the ageism in their own ways, and I just had to throw that in there.
Okay, thank you, Mark. And yes, there's a lot of crossing between topics. One can definitely lead into the other, and I enjoy that for the topic of ageism. Let's say Dan is pretty much the expert in the room on that. He was able to answer, which spurred more questions from me. I think for that show, I probably had maybe 8 or 9 questions, and some of them were not very distinct. But as a result of uh, the commentary that Dan was giving, I was able to formulate on the fly some more and different questions. So yeah, I think one of my favorite shows has been when we talked about Karenisms and Kenisms. That was maybe the fourth fourth episode in the first season. I thought that was a very good show. I enjoyed it. I didn't. It's one of those shows that I probably wouldn't talk about too much in person in mixed company. You know what I mean? But I thought we handled it in intelligently, and nobody got hurt or felt bad about it. Charlie, I know you got something to say. What has been your what has been your favorite episode?
I think probably the topics that resonate most with me are I relate to on a personal level. For instance, we had a show about immigrants coming to America and all that. I was married to an immigrant at one time, so that was very personal to me. Mental health issues we did, and I was an individual I was close to in my life who's dealt with mental health issues. I've also mentioned back in the, I guess it's the first season because I was just looking it up here, foster children, which is of course important to Amy as well here, and that's a very personal subject to me. And as I was mentioning to you all before the program, is I'm a member of the CASA organization for foster children, and I was told I could use episodes of this program for credit for volunteering because I was on the show. It was like being on listen to a webinar or whatever, and using that, not just me talking during that show, but obviously listen to all of you as well.
Cool, very good. Another show that I enjoyed was the one we did on Valentine's Day, for Valentine's Day. It was called You Forgot What? That was a lot of fun. And I think we did one also for Women's History Month that was all women. And I think some of them, um, I'm sorry, Amy was there and Sonia was there. Karen was there as well. Right. And then we brought in some women from outside, professionals in their fields. And it was a very interesting conversation about women in business, women in the corporate world. So I was going to not ask this question, but if you could give one idea to make the podcast different, more intriguing, better, if you will, for any upcoming season, what might that one thing be? It can be just a short answer, a short explanation, and we'll just take show of hands because everybody may not have an answer to this question. It's kind of something I just thought about. So raise the hand. Amy, yes.
So I think the podcast is great. So I want to say that I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, if only you would do this, it would be so much better. This is just an idea for something else perhaps we could try. Maybe once a month or something like that, or maybe just a couple times a year. If somebody had a topic that they particularly wanted to spotlight, maybe offer a format where Karen's spotlight. Karen gets 10 minutes to talk about her topic that she is very passionate about, and then perhaps the rest of us could react to it. I love that you really sort of keep us honest, Calvin, with the it's red, that means you got to stop talking. Someone else needs a turn. And I know a lot of us would probably, just talk for an hour if we wanted to. I would be interested in hearing a little bit more for folks, again, kind of with some I don't want to say rules, but being mindful about it, where I would love to hear what folks bring to the table on the, maybe it's something we've talked about, maybe it's something we haven't, but this is and I'm just going to use the term spotlight again. It doesn't have to be that.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a lot that folks could bring to the table. So that's my idea.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And just real quick, Amy, what was your favorite episode?
Yeah, I was scrolling through them and every single one, I'm like, oh, that one was amazing. That one was amazing. Honestly, I think the holiday one where it was diverse holiday celebrations, because as somebody who Christmas, what I think, quote unquote, everybody celebrates, it was wonderful to hear from folks who actually do things differently. And I just appreciated that so much. I felt like I came away with a very, very full heart after that episode. So that is my personal favorite.
Okay, great. Karen, what's your favorite episode?
Hold on. My favorite, I have two. Policing in America and mental health. During doing my research for the police, and these shootings and stuff, and how police officers are not charged but not doing time, I learned so much about the laws in each state pertaining to policing. And one would think that it would be universal across the state, but they're not, and the one about mental health was important to me because when I was a young girl, the director, Hugh Butts of Bronx Psychiatric Center, asked me, what do you want to be? I said, I want to be a psychiatrist. He was like, are you sure? He's like, that's dealing with minds and things that don't go right. And he said something to me that has stayed in my mind since back in the early 70s. He said, when a person's mind is no longer functioning properly, it will never ever be the same again without medication. And we see it every day. Our government chooses not to acknowledge it. They try to pawn it off on so many different things. Yes, we have people who are mean, nasty, and kill and hurt and so forth. But then you have people who need to be institutionalized. That's how they can function. Way back when, we had people who were institutionalized who they took to work, transported to work, but they came back to the hospital so that they can get their meds, and they were functioning individuals in society. And it just, like, when I did the research, it from the 70s up until now, not much has changed. No value has been given to so many things that we would think should have more value.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And anybody else have any idea on something that you might want to see done with the podcast? Mark.
Yeah, I was thinking it would be fun to have an opening theme song and closing theme song. That could be an original, like a little electronic thing or something that kind of cued the show up and said goodbye with, and that's just an idea.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Charlie.
I'm going to go after what Mark said there. My thought is actually somewhat close to his. I always thought the show should be funnier. And I say that because I look at it, and Mark and I come from entertainment backgrounds, but I look at the dynamic within the show. And this core group, of most of whom are here tonight, we've done a number of shows together on that. And we're not suggesting anybody here is a stand-up comedian or anything like that. But what I've seen, and I've watched other shows that I like. I'll give you. I'm a big fan. It used to be on McLaughlin Group. I love the McLaughlin Group, and it was a political show, and yeah, it was conservative and liberal opinions on this show. They had kind of a snarky host. Mr. McLaughlin is no longer with us, and on it, and I just love that show. And everybody got their say in, and there was humor involved in it. You know, everybody, it was not, you know, everybody hated everybody else, and that sort of thing. And so my thought is, you know, we've done 2 seasons, 25 shows or whatever it is on there. And I'm not saying, you know, you have to go out and say a joke or something like that, but, you know, we all generally know each other, at least through the context of this podcast, you know, and I would like to see that more. I think we're doing great on the subjects, and I hope we continue with that. You know, there's been a lot of good ideas, which you've already mentioned for this season, and I certainly hope that continues in the next season.
All right.
I wanted to just jump in. Thank you for saying it. First of all, McLaughlin Group. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I've not thought about that in forever. But my husband has listened to every episode, and he had actually said, give folks a break. Like sometimes the topics are so heavy. And he said, of course, it's a podcast. I can turn it off. I can, you know, stop for a minute, look out the window and come back to it. But I think that is kind of in line with your humor. Is he's like, sometimes you just get so, as a listener, emotionally invested in it that giving them some kind of break would help them stay engaged with the show. So I just wanted to piggyback.
Yeah, and there are regular people on this show, and there's guests on there. You know, it varies obviously, and you know, people and that, but there's that dynamic within the show that's always here, even obviously if they're talking about serious topics.
Okay. Thank you all very much. Anybody else have anything to add? Dan? Dan's good. Dan's Mr. Humor over there.
I had a couple other ideas too.
Yes, Mark.
I also was thinking about sometime just doing a headline show where we just throw headlines out and talk about it for 5 minutes. Just you know what I mean? And that could be there could be a lot of change up in that kind of a thing, because we can throw a lot of different headlines into the mix and have serious and funny together. And then just for fun, I'm going to say puppetry. Puppets.
On a
Puppets.
podcast.
What kind of puppets, Mark?
Now, I love puppets. I love puppets. Don't get me wrong. I love puppets. I just wonder how that would work on a podcast. But yeah, let me think about that over the summer.
I mean, they would talk. They would talk about
Would make it work. They would find a way.
I have some puppets if you want. So,
well, I have some socks that could be puppets, but let me think about that over the summer. And Sonia, yes.
How about you invite a guest on, and only one person knows that person's background, and kind of play a game with it to try to figure out who this person is and what they're about without them actually telling you. So it's similar to like a what was that? Not guess my line.
What's my line?
What's
my line?
Yeah, what's my line? Or you know, try to find out some identity of somebody. Like you may have like Mark mentioned, there's a young lady that does puppets. And she could talk to you in her different voices or whatever, you know, just invite her on and, you know, just ask some crazy questions to try and get to learn them, and then throw something crazy back at them and see what they give you.
Okay. Well, thank you for that as well. I wanted to thank all of the panelists for your hard work, dedication, your commitment, the energy that you guys bring to the podcast for each and every episode. And I'm going to ask maybe Dan, because Dan has been fighting some things over the last few months, and we're glad to have him back today. Dan, I'd like to give you the last word.
So we got something unique here, and I think it's because of the individuals who participate. We really are greater than you know, as a whole. You know, we can add some humor, we can mix it up a little bit, but what we're doing here is we're really bringing topics of the day out there in a respectful manner. And as I said earlier, the way we model it, I think, is really important. And I look forward to the growth that we're all going to have together.
All right. Thank you all again very, very much. Mark, Amy, Charlie, and Sonia, Karen, Dan, thank you guys so much. Have a great summer. The next episode of Talking Heads will post on Spreaker.com on Tuesday, September 19th, and it will post at 6 a.m. Central Time in the morning. But of course, listeners, you can access it anytime after that time. It'll be there forever. I'm your host, Calvin Gibbs, and it's always important that we take 2 steps to the rear and get on out of here. Until the next episode of Diverse Talking Heads, enjoy your summer, and we're going to say exit stage left.